Hold on, let 1 second. Make sure I have tonight. The traveling librarian, Jeff Kleps, is here. Will take us on an armchair traveler's journey to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, the two largest of the 7 United Arab Emirates, best known for their rapid growth, cutting-edge architecture, and lavish lifestyles. There's much more to see if you dig deeper. Mosques, markets, and a mix of ethnicities and cultures make the UAE a challenging place to live and work, but intriguing to visit. Jeff is a recently retired head of reference services at the Lucius Beebe Memorial Library in Wakefield, Massachusetts, and an avid traveler and photographer. Enjoy the show.
Thanks, Jill. Hi, everyone. I'm just quickly putting my email in the chat so that if any of you do have questions after the program is over, feel free to email me at jeffklapes@gmail.com. I'm happy to take questions about this program or anything else that you might have. For those of you who've been to the programs before, I think I've been doing these for probably 1.5 years for Chelmsford. It's been fun to meet a lot of you. And for those of you who've been here before, welcome back. And for those of you who haven't, I hope you enjoy the program. Because this is a webinar, you don't have the ability to sort of interrupt me and ask questions verbally. So do feel free to put any questions either in the chat or in the Q&A. And I'll try and keep an eye on those as we go through the program, and anything that I miss will catch up at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. Does that look okay? Good. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be looking tonight at 2 of the Emirates of the UAE. And to put it on the map first, we're going to focus mostly on Dubai. That's the one everybody is probably more familiar with. But Dubai is actually one of 7 Emirates in the United Arab Emirates. It's the 2nd largest in area after Abu Dhabi, and also, but it does have the largest population. Just to see on the map, you can see the UAE is basically this little corner here. It's a relatively small geographic area. And in fact, I can give you a better idea of the geography by superimposing an outline of Massachusetts over it. So you can see it's not actually all that large, and considering that much of it is desert, the vast majority of where most people live and where you might be likely to visit if you went there is in a pretty long, small stretch along the coast. This was a trip that I took a few years ago in February, which is a very nice time to be there, because although it is desert, it can actually be quite humid on the coast, and very, very hot in the summer. As you can imagine, it gets frequently well over 100 degrees in the summer. February, January are good times to be there. The UAE was originally called the Trucial States back when they were British protectorates. But in 1971, they all united as independent nations, although Bahrain, which is up here, and Qatar also were originally part of the group, but they backed out a couple of years later and became independent nations separate from the UAE, although they have a lot in common. This is just to give you an idea of where we're going to visit. This trip that I took at the time was mainly along the coast between Abu Dhabi and Dubai. I also spent about 1.5 weeks in Oman, which I have a separate program on if you're ever interested, and that's an absolutely fabulous place to visit. To be perfectly honest with you, I liked it a lot better than the UAE. It was much more traditional. But today we're going to look at the much more modern cities along the coast. Right now, there's about 2.5 million, 3 million people in Dubai. But what's interesting about all of the Emirates, particularly Dubai and Abu Dhabi, is that the overwhelming majority of the population, and by that I mean anywhere between, say, 85 to 90% of the people who are there are actually foreign guest workers. Most of them come from South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. There are also quite a few from East Africa, and the Philippines and places like that. That creates a very interesting social climate there, because the actual natives, the Arab natives, have a very different lifestyle and different legal status as well, and has kind of created an uncomfortable and rather unsustainable kind of economy. We'll see where this goes over the next few decades. But starting in Dubai, again, just to put it on the map, it is on the Gulf Coast, and it has amazing beaches. It's all sand, and it's centered on an original creek, which you can see here. It may surprise you to know there was ever a creek. It's not a very big one. It's only maybe 5 miles long. And the city started in this particular place and has grown dramatically since then. I'm sure many of you have probably heard of the artificial islands, some of which you can see here. This is from Google Maps. There are all kinds of artificial structures that have been built along the coast over the years, along what is roughly a 20-mile coastline. And it greatly expands the amount of real estate and coastline that they have. Here's an old photograph of Dubai before everything erupted in with the discovery of oil in the 20th century. Until about World War II, Dubai was centered on this little creek, and you can see here in this old aerial photograph that it was very tiny, not much bigger than Chelmsford at the time, in fact, probably quite a bit smaller. It was a trading port on the Gulf, and it was also well known for its pearl diving. But a couple of things happened to kind of collapse the economy there. One was the Depression, which of course affected everybody worldwide, and also, unfortunately, the discovery of cultured pearls, which meant that natural pearl diving no longer was as important economically as it used to be, since people could grow pearls artificially. So the economy kind of collapsed at that point, and stagnated until oil was discovered in the 1960s. And then, of course, development took off, and now you see Dubai looking the way it does now, with an immensely growing population, massive construction. I can't believe the number of things that have been built there since I was there only a few years ago, and construction keeps going and going and going. We're going to look at a lot of that as we go through the program. I stayed actually by choice, however, not in the fancy ritzy parts of town, because I wanted to get a slightly more authentic sense of the city. So I stayed in an area called the Bourg Dubai, which is a much more, it's the area around the creek, essentially, the original part of the city. It's much more walkable. It doesn't have as many of the big skyscrapers. It has much more street life, and it's definitely much cheaper. This was the hotel I stayed in, which was certainly not one of the more attractive ones, but it was perfectly clean, perfectly comfortable, and very conveniently located to a lot of stuff. Here's the view from my window. And you can see this part of the city looks very different from the sort of Las Vegas-y skyline that goes up the coast. The main lobby of my hotel, and another view out the hotel. One of the nice things about being in this part of town is I was right across the street from the bus station, which is very convenient, because if you want to travel anywhere in the country, I definitely don't recommend renting a car if you go there, because the driving is kind of insane. And it's so incredibly cheap to take other kinds of transportation anywhere. You can get from Dubai to Abu Dhabi in about 2 hours on a bus for barely a few dollars. So it's a much easier way to get around. A nice thing about this part of town is it's about as historic as Dubai gets. The historic area is kind of sanitized. It feels somewhat Disneyfied, but it's still very pleasant. And here you can see actually this area that we're looking at here, where you can see the Burj Dubai skyscraper way off in the distance. But this area here, which has been redeveloped in a historic fashion, what you're looking at in this photo is actually the main downtown metro stop. Dubai has an excellent subway system, metro system. much of which is actually elevated. I shouldn't call it a subway. And it's a very cheap and easy way to get around to most of the things you might want to see as a tourist. There's a number of historic sites in this part of town as well. This is the house of Sheikh Saeed Al Maktoum, and this is his former mansion. And they've turned it into a museum of the history of the city, which I think is very interesting because it takes it from the earliest days, back when there were only a few thousand people at most in Dubai, all the way up to the present day. And it also shows the early style of architecture that was very popular here. Bear in mind, of course, this is a desert climate and sits on the Persian Gulf. So the weather kind of demands a certain kind of building to keep people cool. So a lot of it is mud brick construction, and it's specifically designed to keep the interiors as cool as possible and to take advantage of whatever breezes you might run across. The museum, actually, on the right, you can see an old Dubai stamp. They have a wonderful collection in this museum, if you like this kind of thing, of historic stamps and coins, historic photos and documents from the earliest decades of the city. The towers that you see here, and we're going to see a lot of them as we go through the photos, are called wind towers, and they are common both in old and new architecture in the UAE. The new ones tend to be fake, just reproductions of the old style, much the same way that we often put shutters on our colonial houses, even if they don't actually do anything. The original wind towers, which are Iranian in origin, remember, Iran is right across the Gulf, very, very close by. And it was a typical style of architecture where these towers on each of the houses tend to gather winds from four directions and funnel them down into the interiors of these houses to take advantage of whatever cool breezes there might be, and as a way of keeping houses cool. So you see a lot of them now. Most of the ones that you would see today, however, on newer construction are basically just artificial ones because air conditioning is everywhere in Dubai. Here I am in front of the public library. As a public librarian, I have to always stop at the library. And here you can see from this part of town where I was staying, if you look across the creek, you can see the part of Dubai that is much better known to foreign tourists, where there's just endless skyscrapers, and we'll see a lot of those more close up. But I like this part of town because there was much more street life. It felt a little bit more like where people live rather than where people work and vacation. There are some also beautiful mosques in this part of town. And again, more of this beautiful historic architecture. There's even a fort. This particular fort is the original one that protected the entrance to the creek. And it is typical of Arabian style fortress architecture with mud and brick construction and defensive towers and very thick walls. It's called the Al-Fahidi Fort. And it can now be visited. They've turned it into a nice museum. And it sits right on the creek. Here you can see the entrance to the creek as it goes out to the open Gulf. And this whole area kind of retains a little bit of the feeling of old Dubai, but the newer city is always present off in the distance. You might notice, if you can see way over off here, you can see the Burj Dubai, which as of today is still the reigning highest, tallest skyscraper in the world for as long as that lasts. And it does look rather hazy. That's not specifically smog. It's more likely to be dust and humidity. It may seem odd that there's humidity in the desert, but because these are cities that are right on the coast, they do get a lot of ocean moisture. The creek still is an active working port, believe it or not, and you'll see a lot of these boats. This one is called a dhow, D-H-O-W, and there is still a whole fleet of them that are operational, taking all kinds of goods, mostly around the Persian Gulf area and up and down the coast of the Indian Ocean, along mainly along the African coast. There's also a number of water taxis, these smaller boats, which are called abras, and they are a very convenient and cheap way to make a quick trip across the to the opposite side of the creek if you want. This area on the right side is called Dira. We'll visit that in a minute as well. And you can hop an abra for about the equivalent of maybe 25 cents and just take a quick trip across. Where you can see the old souk. There are a lot of markets in this part of town. It's a bit touristy, but it's still very atmospheric, and there's an enormous mix of different cultures here. I've been asked often if you need to learn any Arabic to travel in the UAE, and the answer is definitely no. In fact, you probably won't even hear much Arabic there because, as I said, so many of the workers there, so many of the population there are guest workers from foreign countries. So they don't tend to speak much Arabic, and they all come with their own languages. So ultimately, it becomes English that is kind of the lingua franca that everybody uses to meet in the middle. English will easily serve you well. On the right here, this little alleyway is called Hindi Lane. There's a large Hindu population from South Asia that lives and works in this part of town, tucked away in a corner. And just some more views of the creek along the way with this huge fleet of boats. The Grand Mosque that you can see here on the left is the tallest in Dubai. It is actually a replica built about 20 years ago to replace the original, which was built at the turn of the last century. And this is more of that main historic district called the Bastakia district, which was originally home to a lot of Persian immigrants, which is one of the reasons why you see this very Persian style architecture. But it's been very much restored. As I said, it's kind of over restored. But it does make an enjoyable place to spend time. And there are cafes and shops and restaurants and museums and so forth. So it's a very pleasant place to walk around. And particularly if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by modern Dubai, this is a nice alternative. Here's an Abra where you can, again, hop with about 20, 25 other people and scoot across to the other side. There's also plenty of boats that will take you on excursions. You can take evening dinner cruises and all kinds of other touristy things as well. And I highly recommend boat rides of some kind, even if it's just a taxi ride, because so much of this creek area is dependent on water that I think you'd really miss a little bit of the atmosphere if you didn't see it from the water. And right across the creek is the Dira section, which is a much more bustling commercial kind of section that has lots of specialized souks and office buildings and markets. It's not quite as dramatic as the touristy section up the coast, but it still is has its own personality. And again, this is a part of the town where you will find a wide mix of ethnicities from around the world, mostly workers, all kinds of different ethnic restaurants, lots of street food. And there's some really nice parks if you go along the boat moorings. They were big in petunias when I was there. That happened to be the time of year. Some very nice parkland where you can stroll along the creek. Weird architecture all over the place. But I think the more traditional lifestyle along the creek is far more interesting. It goes back really to the 1830s, although it was very tiny back then. But that's when the Dubai Creek really started as a port. And even today, It's still, all of these traditional ships are transporting food, appliances, grain, you name it, all kinds of goods. And mostly, as I said, around the Indian Ocean. These are not long distance ships. There's been a lot of different kinds of proposals for new construction in Dubai, and this one kind of fascinated me at the time. It never came to pass, but I'll show you just to give you an idea of just how weird Dubai sometimes the directions it aims in. There was a proposal over, you can see here, these are all the dhows in their wharf area, and there was this proposal to build these giant golden skyscrapers called the Aladdin complex, which would float over the river and float over all of the shipping port underneath. And it never came to pass. There were a number of projects in Dubai that collapsed as a result of the 2008-2010 financial crisis and never got off the ground. But there have been plenty of other things that have been replacing them over the years. One of the projects that I think has actually been completed now is this this building here called the Frame, which doesn't look very big in this picture because we're quite far away, but it's actually enormous. And the idea is that when you get close to it, it actually does sort of frame the skyline of the city. But it is in itself quite an enormous skyscraper. And if you Google it, you can see some more current pictures of the building completed. Some street life along this part of town. One of the things that I would encourage you to go to if you get a chance is all of the markets, including the fish market, which you have to get up really early to go to because most of the fishing boats are selling their wares at the crack of dawn. So if you get there mid to late morning, you'll miss a lot of it. But it's quite an enormous place right along the water. There are also markets for the locals. This isn't just tourist market stuff. It's also all kinds of fruits and vegetables and clothing and housewares and all the kinds of things that locals would buy for their own use. Including, if you're interested, these wonderful fabrics, shoes, and spices. There's a big spice and perfume market. And also quite amazing, probably the biggest market in the whole area is called Goldland. It's the gold market. And this enormous building, it's like the size of Penn Station in New York, is completely filled with gold merchants of all different kinds. I'm not that interested in gold myself personally, but it's a sight for the eyes. Let's say that. Just to walk through it is just incredible to see the kinds of things that they have available. You'll notice I've had a few photographs of locals in typical Arabian style outfits. And for the most part, if you are in the UAE, you will see most of the actual native Arabian Arab population is likely to be wearing white robes and some sort of headscarf, mostly white. That just tends to be the tradition for the UAE. If you see people wearing red and white checkered ones, they are more likely from Saudi Arabia. If you see people wearing something that looks a little bit more like a skull cap, those are more likely Omanis. Each different ethnic group and country has their own particular style. And then, of course, with all the other people from countries all over the place, you'll see a wide range of different kinds of facial features, clothing, styles, and so forth. Here is actually a good example. This is a billboard. These were not actual people that I saw, but this is a good example of the Saudi style. Although the greeting that they're giving is a typical Emirate greeting, rubbing noses together like that. But I do want to take you away from here because I know what most people are interested in Dubai is all the incredible massive stuff that is built along the coast and is still being built. This is Burj Dubai. You can see through the mist. So we're going to head off up north away from the more traditional side of things. And one of the ways that you can do that is by taking the metro system. The metro opened in 2009, so it's not actually all that old. And it has made the city much easier to get around. It still is a very car-centric city, but for tourists, the metro is very inexpensive, very safe, very easy, and essentially runs in one long line up and down the coast and goes to pretty much anything that a tourist would be likely to want to see, or close enough that you could walk to it or take a taxi. This is one of the major cross stations. There are actually two lines. And because of all the wealth in Dubai, and because this was just a massive new project that was built in the middle of everything, it's very beautiful. They have gorgeous artwork. These glass sculptures are meant to look like jellyfish floating in the air. Another thing that's kind of interesting about the metro is it's completely automated. There are no actual drivers. It's very efficient and has great views as you because much of it is elevated until you get into the creek area. So it's a good way of taking a quick and inexpensive tour up and down the coast to get an idea of what the landscape looks like from the comfort of an air-conditioned subway car. Here, you'll notice that they do have, this is a Muslim country after all, and fairly conservative culturally and socially. So on all public transit, there are special cars or areas within cars for women and children, and men are expected to stay in a separate part of the car. They are relatively tolerant of tourists making innocent mistakes. You might, if you accidentally ended up in the wrong part of the car, you won't get arrested, but someone will probably speak to you nicely and point out that you need to move. But it's a very new, comfortable, sleek system, and it will shoot you up to all the different things that you can see up the coast. Here is the Dubai Mall, which is still at this point one of the world's largest. It has several hundred stores, 120 restaurants, 14,000 parking spaces, and 13 million square feet. So if you like malls, Dubai is for you. I'm not actually, I actually can't stand malls, to be perfectly honest. But when you're traveling in a place like this, the malls themselves are actually a destination. Even if you're not there to go shopping, the architecture alone and the people watching is certainly as interesting as any of the stores that you might see. A lot of the stores, in fact, are the same kind of international stores that you'd see in any mall, including right here in Massachusetts. But the massive size of these buildings makes them kind of a fun place to just stroll around and see people. And an interesting thing about them, of course, is that for locals, they're also a very sociable place to go because they're air conditioned. People in Dubai tend not to walk around in the heat unless they have to. So this is the kind of place where if you just want to go and kill some time in a sociable environment, you can do it, and there's things to see, things to do, things to eat, and you can do it all in the comfort of a large air-conditioned space. Most of the malls, there are several huge malls, have some kind of additional attraction. This particular one has an aquarium, which has separate tickets that you can buy to go through. But even if you don't want to do that, there's this enormous tank where you can just look at the tank for free by walking through the mall, even if you don't want to spend time in the aquarium itself. And all kinds of amazing interior design and sculptures. Here's actually a genuine dinosaur skeleton, all lit up in blue neon. And you'll notice a lot of the architecture, even though these are very new buildings, perhaps 20 years old. All of these buildings are designed with a certain Eastern flair, certainly. But Eastern though it may be, this is still a mall, and there's you'll see a sort of interesting mix of Arabs in their traditional outfits drinking a Starbucks coffee and playing with their telephones. It's just a very weird kind of experience to be there. You can see a guy sitting up in the background using his Mac laptop. It's this odd mix of East and West. Here's a sculpture. This is actually a water fountain streaming down. And here is again, a very traditional father with his non-traditional sons, both sitting there playing on their phones. Actually, I realized I made a mistake earlier. I mixed up the headdresses. The checkered red and white ones are actually the UAE style, and it's, if you see the ones that are pure white, they are more likely to be Saudis. This is a view actually out the metro. If you ride the metro, it's worth it to get in the front of the car where you can actually just look out and watch the skyscrapers coming towards you. They are planning to build a high-speed rail line. I haven't checked recently to see what the status of that is. I have a feeling it hasn't gotten very far recently. The idea is they were planning a, incredibly expensive, I don't know how many tens of billions of dollars, to connect Kuwait City all the way down the Gulf Coast, through Bahrain, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and then all the way into Oman, which would be an immense undertaking, although easier than in a lot of other places because much of that land is essentially open land. So they could actually put a major project on it without having to displace very many people. And heaven knows they have money, but I'm not sure that that project has actually ever gone anywhere. There's a wide range of skyscrapers, some of which are very stylish, some of which are downright ugly, but all of them are eye-catching, let's put it that way. And the metro is a great way to see them because most of them are built along the metro line. This is one of the earliest skyscrapers. These two towers called the Emirates Towers were really among the first iconic structures that were built in the beginning of the boom. One is a hotel, the other's offices. But there's a whole range of very strange looking avant-garde architecture, some much more successful than others. And most of them look out onto this immense highway, which is the Sheikh Zayed Road, the main thoroughfare that runs up the coast, maybe half a mile or so from the coast, and parallels the metro line. It has horrendous traffic and lots of accidents. You can see there are about anywhere from 12 to 14 lanes, and the speeding is terrible. One of the things you'll probably notice if you travel there is the Arabs, the wealthy Arab native population, particularly the young men, much like here in the United States, they are likely to have very fast cars and drive them like crazy people. So don't rent a car when you go there. We're going to get up close to this a little bit later, but this is one of the other iconic buildings in Dubai, the Burj Al Arab, and the Jumeirah Beach Hotel near it. I'll show you that close up a little bit later. Here is another one of the malls. This is called the Mall of the Emirates, and not too far away. And this bizarre structure here that's part of it is actually an indoor ski slope. Dubai has never let the weather prevent it from doing what it wants to do, so that you can actually go skiing in frigid cold temperatures. They even have a collection of penguins that lives in there as well. Further up, kind of the north end of this stretch of skyscrapers is a separate development area called the Dubai Marina, which is a little bit newer. And it has its own tram system, a massive cluster of skyscrapers built around an artificial marina. So it has a lot of water features, and it's actually a fairly pleasant place to walk around. Here's one of the metro stops. They're very futuristic looking. And the area around this marina, you can see the Burj Al Arab off in the distance. This is one of the areas where some of the artificial islands have been built. The Palm Jumeirah is one of them. There's several at this point. This was the first of 3 very similar developments that ended up adding about 300 and some odd miles of coastline. And the marina is all kind of down in this area here. So if you take the metro, then you switch to a different separate metro line, which takes you all the way out about 3 miles out to the end of the rim of this artificial arrangement. The external rim is supposed to have nothing but hotels on it. And all these individual fronds, it's supposed to look like a palm tree, of course, are residential areas. Each frond has its own streets and its own, each house comes with its own marina, very luxurious. And this central core is where all of the office buildings and shopping and so forth is located. And here is just an overview of all the different kinds of things that are happening there. This is the one I just showed you. An even bigger one was slated for construction further north, another one down here. The World was finished, but has yet to actually be really lived in by anyone. It's a collection of islands that were artificial islands that were supposed to be in the shape of a world map. The vast majority of them are still completely vacant at this point, and some of these other projects either never got off the ground or never got completed, mostly because of financial reasons. But here's a better view of the marina section, with incredible amounts of construction already going on, and continuing to go on. The sad thing about a lot of this development in Dubai is that it really isn't very sustainable. Palm Jumeirah is already sinking, in fact, and certainly being a giant artificial sandbar, it's at risk of sea level rise anyway with climate change. It's basically just rocks and sand. And building something on this scale, I think there's a lot of things that people haven't really, the engineers haven't totally worked them out yet. One of which was that barrier island that wrapped around the whole development eventually caused massive silting because it changed the flow of the tides in the Persian Gulf. And so all of the fancy developments inside where lavish mansions were supposed to be built stunk to high heaven, was full of algae and silt and so forth. So they had to add cuts in that outer ring in order to help circulate the water better. If you do go out all the way, you will see some of these kinds of developments here, where this is a series of those mansions for well-to-do people in typical styles. You can see those wind towers again. Essentially, these are Arabian McMansions, for lack of a better term. And if you get all the way out to the end on that outer rim where all the hotels are, you can see the Atlantis Hotel, which is a companion to the one that you might be familiar with here in North America in the Bahama Islands. This is the same outfit. It's just the style is different. Obviously, it's playing off the Middle Eastern theme a little bit more. And actually, it was kind of a fun place to visit. I don't think I would want to afford to stay there. The rooms are extremely expensive, but it's if you like this kind of extravagant Disneyfied architecture, it's certainly a fun place to spend a couple hours wandering around. They do have incredible interiors. They even have their own aquarium. It's a themed aquarium that's based on someone finding the lost city of Atlantis. So all of the tanks have these interesting designs. Certainly it would be a fun place to take kids if you were ever traveling there. And you can do all of this without being a guest at the hotel. It's perfectly fine they expect people to stroll around. Here you can even see some of the lavish interiors where there's a huge wall of looking into the aquarium tanks. This is one of the public restrooms. But there's a number of other huge hotels too that are either under construction or have been finished since I was there. This is one not too far away from the Atlantis called the Kingdom of Sheba. And it's designed to look like the traditional style of architecture from Yemen, which it kind of does. And I think the idea was that it would be both a hotel and also a place for condominium residences as well. And of course, there's water parks, beaches, restaurants, and so forth, and just endless construction. I kind of felt I was there for about 8 days, maybe, and I would swear that I saw new skyscrapers that had been built by the end of the week, or at least it certainly felt that way. These are some of the ones in the marina area, including this incredible one called the Cayenne Tower, which is 1,000 feet high and is twisted 90 degrees partway up, designed by a famous Chicago architectural firm, actually, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. It's quite something to see from down below. But this marina area does have some very nice waterfront promenades and, again, restaurants, shops, and so forth. So for a place to spend an afternoon kind of exploring the city, it's actually about as walkable and pedestrian friendly as you might find in Dubai. Another place that you can do that is a little bit further south, or I'm sorry, further north, actually. Is the Madinat Jumeirah, which is designed to be like a traditional, albeit extremely luxurious, Arabian market. So it has canals and hotels, restaurants, entertainment, all that kind of stuff, and plenty of shopping designed to look like old-fashioned souks. And it's presided over everywhere by a fantastic view of the Burj Al Arab Hotel. Again, one of the prime advantages of being in places like this is there's a lot of interior air conditioning. So if the weather's unpleasant, you can escape. But there's lots of outdoor seating as well. This is a good example of what I was mentioning at the beginning of the program, where all of this architecture that you see here is completely new and fake, but designed to give the feel of an old Arabian style city. You can take boat rides along here. There's plenty of waterfront dining establishments. This whole area, though, is pretty expensive. So do be prepared to drop lots of money if you want to stay in hotels here or shop or eat here. And I do have to talk a little bit about the hotel because Burj Al Arab is probably with the Burj Khalifa, it is probably, those are the two iconic views that immediately say Dubai. The size is rather deceptive. It was, when it opened, which was back in 1999, it was the tallest hotel in the world. It has since been superseded, although not by much. It's over 1,000 feet high. And although it doesn't look that big, most of what you can see here, each of these windows, is actually multiple floors. Those are not single floors. And there is an enormous atrium on the inside. And to give you an idea of just how big it is, what you're looking at, the Eiffel Tower in Paris could actually comfortably fit inside the open air atrium with room to spare. The cheapest rooms tend to run around $1,200 a night. So it's often a place that you might have to look at from the outside. Even going in to just have a meal will set you back quite a ways, and you do have to have reservations to do that. You can't just walk in without having some reason to be there. You may remember, gosh, it's about 15 years or so now, there was a famous tennis match. This is a helicopter pad way up on the top for high rollers to come directly from the airport to the hotel. And Andre Agassi and Roger Federer very famously played a tennis match high up at the very top of this hotel. Kind of a publicity thing. Not too far away here again is the Mall of the Emirates. Also very big. I didn't find it quite as stylish as the Dubai Mall, that first one we saw, but it's worth it to stick your head in, if only to see the indoor ski slope. You don't have to actually go skiing. There's a place where there's a big balcony that you can look at through the windows, and you can see the penguins and so forth. All of the malls will have valet parking, so if you do happen to rent a car there, you can park your Bentley or your Lamborghini or your Rolls Royce or even your Mini Cooper at the entrance and have someone take care of it. And finally, the last big sort of center of focal point of the city that I want to show you is what's called downtown Dubai. And that's where the Dubai Mall is, but there's an awful lot of other stuff in the same area, and particularly the Burj Al Khalifa, which is the tallest building in the world right now, and certainly the tallest building in Dubai. It's all built around an artificial lake. When I was there, it was kind of interesting. This luxury hotel, which was called the Address at downtown Dubai, had been damaged a couple of months earlier in a spectacular fire on New Year's Eve. This was in 2015. And of course, because it was in 2015, they were all, or because it was New Year's Eve, there was all kinds of conspiracies about whether it was a terrorist attack and so forth. It turned out to actually just be a short circuit. It was caused by an electrical fault, and fortunately, the building was not actually completed or occupied. It was still under construction. So there were no fatalities, but it was quite a spectacular sight. And so by the time I got there, it was completely covered in burlap, which was kind of funny to see a luxury skyscraper looking like that. But there's a number of other skyscrapers built all around this artificial lake, including this opera house that you can see here. At the time, it was still under construction. It's been since completed. And it's kind of designed to look a little bit like one of those dhow ships from the creek. The big draw, of course, is Burj Khalifa, which is currently the tallest building in the world for the time being. There are a number of buildings under construction that will probably surpass it very soon. And but even so, it's certainly worth a visit just because it is actually a very stylish building for being as tall as it is. And if you aren't afraid of heights, it's well worth it to go up. Just to put it in perspective, here's the Eiffel Tower, the Empire State Building, the former World Trade Center in New York. Just to give you an idea of just exactly how tall this is. This building is twice the height of the Empire State Building. 2,700 feet high and 167 floors. So that's about half a mile total. And it can be seen virtually everywhere in the city. It opened in 2010 and was originally called Burj Dubai, but it was then named after the Sheikh of Abu Dhabi because Dubai ran into financial problems about that time, and the Emirate of Abu Dhabi bailed Dubai out to the tune of many billions of dollars. So they decided to rename the tower after him. You can go up. It is possible to visit 3 different levels of the tower, the highest one being the 148th floor. You can also visit the 124th and 125th if you want. And the view from the top is really quite mind-boggling. You are easily twice, if not 3 times as high as any other building anywhere in the area. You can see for miles. It's worth it to try and plan. You have to book a time, obviously. And if you can, try to do it late in the day, because once you get up there, you can stay as long as you want. And if you can catch the sunset or at least see the lights starting to emerge as it gets dark in the city, it's quite a view. Here's looking up towards the Burj Al Arab Hotel and all the way up to the marina area in the distance. Again, you can see a lot of a mix of smog and also moisture coming in off of the Gulf in the evening. I should point out that I am actually afraid of heights, but I made myself do it anyway because I wasn't going to go there and not go up the tallest building in the world. Here we are looking down. This enormous building that you can see down here is the mall, and this is that building that caught fire. Here's a better view of the artificial lake, and all of these buildings are a mix of shopping mall, restaurants, entertainment venues, office buildings, residential buildings, and so forth. But the view from the 147th floor is not to be missed if you have the chance. You can actually just sort of off in the distance, it's not a very good view because it's taken at night through the glass, but these little blobs off in the distance are the world islands that I mentioned earlier. There's about 300 artificial islands that were supposed to be in the shape of a world map. And so this was, what, 5-6 years ago that I was there. And even today, still the overwhelming majority of those islands have never been occupied by anybody. So it is kind of turned out to be a bit of a failure from the real estate point of view. You can actually go outdoors on Burj Khalifa, not where you can actually hang over the edge, but because the wind up there is pretty strong. But there's a good view off in the distance, and you can see how this is the creek area off down here. We're kind of looking towards the west. You don't have to go very far away from the coastline before you get into desert. Almost all of the development is within a few miles of the coast. And here is just one photo to prove how close I got to the edge. And this area, there is glass here too, but this is actually open. So I had to take a picture to prove that I did that. There's an incredible light show at night, and you should definitely hang around this area in the evening because the lights, not just from the light show at the fountain, but all of the buildings lit up. Dubai definitely looks fantastic at night with all the skyscrapers lit up. But I also want to take you quickly to Abu Dhabi, which is kind of, I would say it's sort of the Washington to Dubai's New York City. It is the political capital. It's not as big as Dubai in population, and it's a little bit more sedate and conservative. It's not quite as brash as Dubai, but it is the capital and of the largest of the 7 emirates. It takes about 2 hours to get there. You just zip up the coast in a car or bus. It is slightly smaller in population, the city itself, with about 2 million people, and similar to Dubai, the vast majority, something like 80%, are also foreign expats that come from Africa, Asia, and other places. What is kind of interesting, though, is that the highway that connects the two cities, considering how modern and advanced and how much development has happened in recent years, the highway that connects them wasn't built until the mid-1990s. Before then, it was not actually very easy to get from one place to the other. Unlike Dubai, which is built along the coast, Abu Dhabi is built on a number of natural and also artificial islands. What's a little strange to see here, you wouldn't imagine it in this part of the world, there's a number of mangrove swamps akin to what you might see in the southern United States. So there are parts of it that definitely don't have the feel of Persian Gulf. Here is a downtown park with some giant coffee pot sculptures, typical of the things they serve coffee in there. And like Dubai, it's a mix of very modern and very traditional. There's some very nice waterfront promenades along the harbor front. The harbor is quite protected, unlike in Dubai, which is on the open Gulf. All of the barrier islands here protect a lot of the water from the open sea. And there's an excellent beach. And of course, modern architecture everywhere. We're standing actually on the barrier island looking back to downtown. The breakwater here has an interesting place to visit called Heritage Village, which is a reconstruction, sort of Sturbridge Village-y kind of reconstruction of what life was like there in the period before oil, essentially, in the pre-oil days. It's billed as one of the top attractions in the city. I think it's a bit overrated, but it does have a nice view, and it's certainly a pleasant area to stroll around. And again, kind of akin to Sturbridge Village, they have different exhibits showing what, here's a fortress and what residential buildings would have been like back when Abu Dhabi had only a few hundred or a few thousand people in it. And they do have a museum and, of course, all kinds of local crafts that you can buy. There's a big amusement park. They are building yet another Atlantis-type hotel way out here on the island. Unfortunately, something that you can't visit is the Royal Palace, but you can go by the outside. This is the palace of the Emir of Abu Dhabi. And not far from it, just a little bit down the street, is the Emirates Palace Hotel, which is built in a very similar style. The hotel itself would cost $6 billion to build and has 114 of those beautiful domes, tiled domes. It also has art galleries and functions as a performance center. So they have concerts and plays and musical performances and so forth there as well. And there's a very nice park on the outside. Some street signs, which can be very long and confusing. This completely bizarre building that looks sort of like a shoe is actually the Hyatt Hotel. It's on the outskirts of the city. I only went to Abu Dhabi as a day trip, and you could certainly spend a few more days there if you were really interested, but I think you could see the highlights in a day. But absolutely the one thing that you must not miss, and even if you took a trip up to Abu Dhabi and saw only this and nothing else, I think it would be worth it, is to see the Sheikh Zayed Mosque, which was started by the late president, who is buried on the grounds here. And this absolutely enormous mosque, it can hold 40,000 people, was finished in 2007. And it is visitable by non-Muslims. You can't go into the prayer hall, but you can explore most of the rest of the complex. It was built by workers and with materials from many different countries. The style of the building is kind of a mishmash, but mostly it's trying to echo traditional Persian and Indian architecture. It's completely covered in white marble and mosaics. And inside the prayer hall is, big surprise, the world's largest carpet. But it is an absolutely stunning building. Particularly, I was very lucky when I was there. The weather was kind of variable, so there was beautiful sunny skies, and then a storm kind of came through. So seeing it in different light, light playing off the white marble was quite an effect. There are gardens and pools and this massive entrance courtyard, completely floored in marble. One of the minarets, which you can visit, has a research library in it that has a collection of rare Islamic texts with an education center. And that is something that non-Muslims can visit. And it's probably really the only place in the complex where you can go up, because it's up on like the 3rd or 4th floor, and you can sneak a peek out the windows and get a view from a little higher up. And they do have some very beautiful Islamic texts on display. So as I said, this building alone is worth the trip to Abu Dhabi, even if you saw nothing else. The detail of the ceramics and the marble is just absolutely stunning. This is actually the research library that I was mentioning. It's quite elegant, and they have all kinds of things available, and displays of the artwork and the documents that they've archived there. I would not want to be one of the poor people who has to sweep and mop the marble floors for this thing that I can't imagine how many square meters it is. You can see I got a little over excited with the mosque photographs. There is, here's a bridge very close to the mosque. You can see the sort of unusual serpentine bridge that takes you back to the mainland. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of the the landscape around, which definitely doesn't make you think of Arabia, but these are in fact mangrove swamps, very similar to what you might see down in the Everglades and other parts of the southern US. And this is another city that had an obsession with petunias, clearly, and also some very strange buildings. There's artificial islands being built here as well, although they're not quite the crazy designs that they're doing in Dubai. But there's massive development going on here. Abu Dhabi discovered oil earlier than Dubai, and it's much bigger and has quite a bit more in reserves. But development there, the kind of Las Vegas style development, has been lagging a little bit behind Dubai, but they're rapidly catching up. And these offshore islands are the places where it's happening the most. You can see all this completely open land being developed. While I was there, they were just about to finish the new branch of the Louvre Museum, which was designed by an award-winning starchitect called Jean Nouvel, French architect. The opening was delayed several times. It is open now. And I was able to get close enough to see the dome. Here's a artist's rendering of what it looks like. It's an enormous, I believe it's stainless steel dome that has different layers of mesh that filter the light down into it, and it has collections of the Louvre. There's some examples of kind of god-awful buildings there as well. And we'll finish up by heading back down to Dubai. And on the southern outskirts of the city, I had to stop at this other shopping mall just because it seemed so bizarre. This is the Ibn Battuta Mall, which is named after a 14th century Berber explorer from North Africa. And he traveled all over the world in the 14th century. And this mall is designed in different sections representing different parts of the world that he traveled in. So the food court with its Cinnabon is in Tunisia. There's an enormous section that looks like Egypt and Persia and India and China. It's really, it is basically just a mall, like any other mall. But it's a nice place to kill an hour or two in the air conditioning, just to see how incredibly bizarre it is. Here's some examples of truly awful architecture. I don't know who designed this sort of off-center thing with the windows in all the wrong places. And this ghastly green, I don't know what it is. It isn't actually a Tim Hortons. That's just an advertisement on the side of the building, but it casts this sort of sickly glow around everything nearby. And they even have these cheap twin towered copies of the Chrysler building in New York that just look god awful. And because, of course, this is a Muslim country where the Sabbath falls on a different day of the week, they have a TGI Thursdays, which is a cheap knockoff of the Fridays that we have here. But I did end up finding my favorite part of the city, again, I think, was the part where I stayed, which was quite pleasant, a little bit more real, I think. And I just want to end with a couple of photos of the sunset over the creek with all kinds of people traveling back and forth, lots of nighttime activity, and everything turns kind of a golden color as the sun goes down through the mist and the dust. So that's it for this evening. I do want to just check the questions before I will stop my share. And let's double check the Q&A. Let's see. I'm going to make sure I get any questions. If anybody has any others, do feel free to pop them in now. If let's see. Someone was asking about blue-collar workers and where do they live and how do they afford to live there. That's an interesting story, and that could be a presentation in itself. The answer is not very good, unfortunately. There's a lot of exploitation in the UAE. If you remember, the vast majority of the population that I said were foreign workers, many of them, a significant portion of them, are actually, it would not be going too far to say that they are basically in modern slavery or servitude. Many of them work in construction for a lot of these projects, and they come to the UAE, of course, because there is economic opportunity and they can, in theory, send money back to their families in their home countries. The problem is they are very often sequestered in housing complexes where their travel documents, passports, and so forth are taken away from them, so they can't easily go anywhere on their own. And they are bussed back and forth between the place where the barracks where they live and the construction sites. These are basically workers who are exploited. And there's been a lot of concern in the international community from organizations like Amnesty International and similar outfits about worker exploitation, because so much of the economy there is based on this really not okay situation. Not everybody is in that bad. There's also plenty of people working in kind of the middle levels. Most of them are likely to be living more in the area where I stayed around the creek. Bear in mind that native Emiratis have extremely extensive benefits because of the economy. Their marriages are paid for. Many of them do not work because they do not need to. They often have free housing. Some of them have jobs that are basically just an excuse to go into the office and go home. They are a very rarefied, tiny portion of the population way up at the very top. The inequity is extreme. The thing that's a little misleading about it, though, is that the inequity is not between citizens of the country, it's between citizens and not citizens. So a lot of the statistics get skewed by that, because if you look at the statistics based solely on the actual citizens, legal citizens of the UAE, native Arabs, it looks quite nice. It's only when you take into account all of these other workers that are not actually entitled to the same benefits, and have different laws applied to them and so forth. It's a bad situation. Someone also was asking about Western clothing. Yes, Western clothing is all over the place. It is such a cosmopolitan place. You will see lots of native Emiratis wearing traditional clothes, both men and women, but you will see a variety of people in all kinds of outfits, because again, they come from all over the world. The majority of the people that you see will not be Arabs when you walk around the city, by far. The vast majority of people that you run into will either be tourists or foreigners working there or visiting there or doing business there or something. Women can drive. Yes, women can actually drive in the UAE. What else? Prices for food. As a tourist, I would say prices could be all over the map. You can spend unbelievable amounts of money in Dubai if you feel like it. There are hotels that are just like, well, like I said, the Burj Al Arab, I think, starts at $1,200 a night for a little room. The place I stayed in was probably no more than $100 a night. Food you can eat in some of the best restaurants in the world, or you can get street food that hardly costs anything and it's delicious. In fact, I liked the area that I was because there were some really nice, there were some food courts nearby that had all kinds of different ethnic restaurants. There was a lot of street food, and all of that was no more expensive than you would pay at an inexpensive restaurant here. Alcohol is not widely served unless you are in a resort area. They do have alcohol. It's just you're not going to see it on the street. What else do I see? The native attitude towards U.S. tourists. There's no problem. They get tourists from all over the world. The advice that I could give you, though, it matters less what country you're from as how you behave. This is a conservative Muslim country. It is very socially conservative in a lot of ways, and it's easy to forget that because you're in a city that's considered the Las Vegas of the Middle East. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to be respectful of the traditions there. And certainly wandering around in skimpy outfits is not a good idea. You will probably hear stories every now and then in the news of Westerners who get arrested and they have horrible legal problems trying to get that resolved and they're stuck in jail for months and so forth. Those are people who invariably did something stupid like got wildly drunk on the streets. And yeah, you definitely don't want to do that. If you are in a resort where it is specifically for foreigners, sure, you can wear your bathing suit and have a Mai Tai by the pool, but you are not going to walk around the street doing that kind of thing. And in terms of general dress and public behavior, it is a fairly sedate, conservative society in that respect. What was the other thing I was going to say, though, about that? It just went out of my head. Something about international visitors and behavior. Oh, well, I'll think of it. Are there any other questions? See a lot of people saying they enjoyed it. That's nice. I'm happy about that. As I mentioned at the beginning, do feel free to contact me by email or through the library can put you in touch with me if you have any questions about this specific program or any others as well. I'm always happy to talk about any of my travel experiences. I'm not an expert, but I've been a lot of places, so I'm always happy to hear other people's experiences and happy to give advice where I can. So if there are no more questions, I will end the program, and I want to thank everybody for coming. I know I'm forgetting the date. I want to say it's October 5th. I think I'm doing another, it will be the next program for the Chelmsford Library. And I believe we're doing Transylvania, which is appropriate for October. So I hope I'll be able to see some of you then. So thank you, everyone, and good night.